So welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is a live show recorded for Ustream.tv and also for YouTube for people to watch at their leisure. This is part two of the cottage, and it's from a book that I found in the pound shop called World of Cottages and Castles, and I wasn't sure about the quality of the paper, so I've printed it, I photocopied it on 100 GSM photo paper, which is a little bit stronger than ordinary photo paper, and I found that's actually perfect. And my printer, which is an eco tank, an Epsom eco tank, I find that the ink doesn't run no matter what you do, whether you use chameleon pens or water or anything, so that's quite good. I've got the baby wipe at the top, so when I blow a little bit of dust off, it's going straight onto the baby wipe. I've got my little pot of tablespoon of water there. I've got my blending tools here. I've got a soft brush if I want to use my eraser, which is handy. I've actually got some fresh nibs as well because they've got a sharp edge on them, so I'm going to use that to get some highlights on the end of these tiles. So this isn't set, this is all kind of just sitting here, so this pastel can move because I haven't used it. I've got my scalpel blade in its case, it's a razor case, so that it's not going to be I've also got, I found one of these, it's an old one, so I don't know how rusty it is, but the blade looks fine. But you can use that kind of blade. Got my Derwent sharpening guard, and I use that for people when I'm working, so you can see how safely to do it, but normally I don't use it. I don't use it because I've been doing it for 30 odd years. And I have found a Faber-Castell, this is a little kind of, it's like an emery board, but it's for pastels and for sharpening your pencils and for sharpening a point on charcoal. So you can get quite a nice sharp effect on that. But you can make your own. You can buy some sandpaper, some fine sandpaper, or 2 grades, or even 3 if you really want to, but you want a finer one because otherwise you'll just scratch your pencils to bits. So a fairly fine one, and then just make some strips and staple them together, and you can just pull off one when it gets too used. Looks like I've used charcoal on that. I haven't used this for years, but I thought I'd fish it out. I've got my little water brush for brushing across, but you can have a cheapy one, anything that's got a bit of a soft brush, because if you move this it will move. Having said that, I did drop a drop of water on it earlier, but it seems to have dried, so that actually will be set now, that won't move. I've got some little soft, these are only a cheapy set, but they're a soft blender. And then I've got my 2 firm blenders that I haven't got a clue where they came from, but this one is about £8 to £10 now. It's a bit expensive, and if you feel this cheapy makeup sponge, you've got the same kind of hardness, so you can pick and choose what you want to use. There's a little water brush there and a bigger water brush, and then my rigger, which I have just popped somewhere, that I use for fixing, but I'm not going to be fixing yet, but I will be fixing the flowers once I've done those. And then I've got a bit of a reference, which is an old cottage. So I've picked out the colours for the and the colour's not brilliant because it's flashing out a bit, but if you can see the colours there. So I'm using a little bit of a reference, not exactly, but just a little bit, and it seemed to work quite well. And of course it'll give you the nice flowers to kind of use as a reference for colours, because obviously there's some sunshine and some shadows, so you've got a bit of an idea of what foliage is going to look like in shadow and in shade. And again, I quite like the idea of that hedge completely different colours. There's about 10 colours in there. So it's quite good to use a bit of a reference. I've actually just rested this onto a book rather than onto the mat, because it's just a little bit softer. And the other day I set out my pastels here from the palest colours. I like to go from the palest, and it's a little bit difficult because you've got greys and pinks in there, so we can put all the sand ones together, and then that's a vanilla, but it's almost near the olive, which is here, and that's a little bit darker pink because we wanted a pinky salmon in there, and then we've got the seal at that end, dark sanguine. A red Venetian, which I'm not sure I'm going to use, and a French grey. So they're going to go with there. So they're roughly in tonal value. And then, because I've got quite a few cottages to do, and I quite like the roof, what I did is I've put them all name facing forward, and so this is instead of having a palette. I can't make a palette because of paint because my hands are very bad. So this is my palette that I am going to be playing with. So if I take a photograph of this in our own time, my camera's very slow, so I shall take a photograph. And what I've got now is a picture of my palette that I can read, and I know all the colours I used for the bricks. And so if I'm going to start and put them into like an album of coloured pencils, and so I'll know if I do another roof or if I do another wall, roughly the colours. Although it won't take long to get used to them, but sometimes it's quite nice to do that, especially if you forget what you're doing. Now this is a smaller piece, so we should get that finished. But we want to go underneath. I don't know what that is. It looks like an overhanging something or other, but anyway, we'll have a go. So what I want to do is look at the photograph, and there seems to be some bricks. So there's kind of some bricks, and it's not exactly the same, but I kind of like the idea of this. So I'm just going to kind of go in with some little marks. Now this is where the sun's coming here, so that's why we've got the shadow there, so it's kind of hitting across. So this looks like a bit of a veranda, I think. Maybe not. Just start with some little scratchiness, and this is why it's quite easy for me, because you don't have to hold the pencil, you can just push little marks in. I wouldn't have thought you're going to get too much. So I'll zoom in and then you can see how it turns out. Now I've never done this before, so it might not work, no idea. But I'm using the same technique as the top, because you've got to be a little bit careful, because we don't have the advantage of having pastel paper. Now I'm hoping to get some from a gentleman called Colin Bradley, and he has brings out a pad of pastel paper which has a fine tooth to it. It's not the biggest tooth for pastels, but it'd be perfect for these, and they're this size, printer size, A4, which is about 11.5 by 8.25. So that means that you could put this pastel pencil paper into the printer, and you could print out your Bennett Kleins if you buy it online, or you could print out anything you want, or photocopy something and put that paper in your printer, and it's fine enough to go through. So that means that you would then have a tooth, and you could get about 5 or 6 layers. But when we're using ordinary paper in a colour book and a printer paper, it's so soft and shiny, you can only get a couple of layers. So we've got to be a bit careful. So I've used that one. I'm going to go into the next one. And actually I've realised that the pale olive, the pale olive was the colour I did all the woodwork. So I knew I'd seen it somewhere. So that's going to actually mix in quite well. The colours, okay, just let me have a quick look at the see if I can brighten that up a bit. Oopsie. There's certain things you can do, certain things that you shouldn't do. That might be a little bit better. Just have a look at this pastel colour. Yeah, that's not so bad. I think it could be one of my lights. Yes, I think that's better. My daylight light lamp is brilliant, but it does. In England we're having some pretty cloudy days, miserable cloudy days, and it plays havoc. It plays havoc with everything, with your lamps. So again, I'm just giving an indication that things are kind of a bit. Now this is slightly different because it's a brick, but I still just want to put just some colour in there. Kind of like, I think that's going to be a flat colour. So, and again, I'm pushing down a bit too much there because I'm getting too much dust. So before I blow, I'm just going to see if I can swish this in. Because if you make too much dust, you're throwing away the gorgeous pastel colour. So might just leave that as is. Just put a bit of shadow in there. So we want to go to the next colour, and again I'm just dotting just a bit of colour. And it is quite random. This is quite, it needs to be a little bit random. It can't be too set, but what we need to do is use every single colour. Some more than others, it depends. Now I'm not actually looking at the reference, which I should be doing, but we're just gonna, this is a practice. This, I've never done this before, so this is a bit of a practice. This is a practice run. It's a bit like doing the first page on your colour book. It's always a practice to see how things react and how much paper and pencil you can get on here. So I might actually just zoom out a little bit. I hope that light's okay. Just maybe zoom out a smidgen. And then you can actually see that I'm just kind of, and it's just the fingers that are tapping. It's just the two fingers are tapping. The thumb's not doing anything because it's completely useless now. So it's just a bit of scratching and trying to be a little bit careful. But the idea is that there isn't a scrap of white when you've finished. But of course we're still going through all these pencils. So there's quite a lot of pencils to go through. And we're getting darker. But I'm not really bothered about shadow because I can get away with it with the first blend just about. All I'm trying to do is just put a little bit of colour in each one, and then when I get to the last, the darker greys, I can think about, now we've got a bit of orange here, so we don't want very much, just in each brick, probably just a little bit in each brick of that one. And here. Be a bit more selective with this because it is a bright coral colour. And then we have light French grey, so I quite like this. So we want to kind of be tapping into here. And I'm probably going to use the French grey for the shadows because I quite like this. It's a warm grey, so it's going to complement this ivory, very pale ivory colour that I've got, so I quite like that. But I'm just using it in the brickwork for the moment. And basically trying to make it so we don't have excuse me, any white spaces at all. We want rid of every scrap. And again, this is a bit warmer because it's a cottagey colour. So, and we're going to do a very light blend, nothing too drastic, just a bit of a light blend. And again, these can go in the bricks. We've got kind of ready warm bricks. And that's all it is really, it's a bit of repetition. Now if you were using proper pastels or you were using pastel pencils with proper pastel paper, you wouldn't do this. You would have a flat base colour down and probably smudge it with your hand or with a tissue, and then you would have a flat base colour to then build on. But we don't have that luxury. We cannot have the extra layer because we don't have any tooth in this paper, so we have to get the texture and the background base colour down in the same, it kind of in one, like we did up here. And I'm just making this up. This is the way I've just decided to do it, and only because it worked with the Hagrid's cottage. So you know, I'm a beginner, don't know what I'm doing really. This is the way that my thumb is allowing me to be creative, otherwise I can't colour in anymore. So now this is quite a strong one. This is dark sanguine, so we've got to be a little bit kind of careful where we put this. But what we're trying to do is instead of having that flat colour that you would normally put down as a base coat, a medium base coat, we are filling every scrap of white space with the colour. So again, I think some of the bricks might be a bit readier than, but this is a practice run. It's on photocopy paper. If it doesn't work out, it's fine. It can go in the bin. It's not important. It's not expensive pastel pencil. Right, so this one is my seal, and I've been using this for shadow. So I'll have a very quick look at the reference. If anybody's got any questions, pop them in caps. I hope I haven't broken chat. Hopefully not. So if we have a look, if we have a look, we have some shadow. So I don't really want to put the shadow in just yet, but what I can do is just kind of give a hint that, you know, things are going to be a bit darker down here than they are kind of up there, kind of thing. And again, we've got to get this in now because we've got one layer, and then we've probably got enough for maybe we can probably get a highlight and a shadow, but that's going to be it. So it's going to be quite a lot up here, a little bit darker because we've got all this kind of foliage going on. And as I say, I don't really know if this is going to work. It's just an experiment of how to use it with a broken thumb. My thumb isn't broken, but it might as well be. Again, that's going to be a bit darker there, and maybe just a little bit here. You need a little bit of contrast in these bricks. I think that will do. So what I've done is I've tried to get some marks, that's the proper colour there, of all over, so there's very little white left. Now if you're doing proper pastelists, don't blend, but you know, we have to blend because we have to smudge that into the paper. So I'm going to use my firm, but you could use anything you want to kind of smush that in. A firmer one's better for this first line. I'm just being a little bit careful of my and I can blow, but there's no dust because I've been very careful. So I start with the lightest and just gentle little. Now really you should use this. This is a better way, like this. But if I do that, you can't see what I'm doing. So you want it vertical, really. I'll just have a very quick go with the lightest one. See if this is better. Let me have a look. Oh, that's better. Yeah. So actually, you want a softer one. A softer blender would be better then, because it's going to keep those nice markings that you've made. Because what you don't want is a universal colour. You want to keep those little marks, but you just want to kind of blend it a little bit. So that was a bit too dark, but that worked better, so we want a softer one. So actually the cheapy ones are the best at the moment. And we're just very lightly tickling that into there, just pushing it about where we want it. But we want to keep some different shades. We don't want to mix it all together to be one, which we could do if we wanted a flat colour, but we don't. So if you wanted a flat colour, you could do this and then smush it together, and you will have a combination of all those gorgeous colours. Probably be a reddy tan because the red is very, very strong. So we're just carefully pushing that in, but leaving a little bit of texture. And that's what these softer blenders do. Just that little bit softer, rather than kind of in your face. And it doesn't matter about it moving off the page, because we will set it when we get it where we want it by stroking over the top with a damp brush. So we've kept those really nice marks in there. So if you can see the difference. But pure pastelists don't actually blend. They frown on blending. But hey ho. This is the colour book. So this is a really nice soft, and we're just gently pushing that in. So we're still doing the job. We're blending. We kind of want to get into there a little bit because we want it to look like that wood is on top of the bricks, which it is. I say normally you would hold it like this, but I can't do that, so and this is going to kind of fall back. It's not very much like Hagrid's cottage, where the be all and end all was those stone bricks. Once we get some bright flowers on here and some foliage, this will become a background and you won't notice it as much. So again, we wanted to get a little bit of shadow going up there. So for a first attempt, quite happy with that. That's fine, it'll be okay because we can do a lot with it. We get some green foliage on there. Oh, and I've just got this piece here. Now this should look darker, this, because we've got some darker bits in it. But we still want a hint of some reds and paler colours. It's just slightly darker because it's not having as much sunlight. So if I turn that very carefully, I can put some sand green under here, and I'm liking this colour quite a lot, and I can smush it. So first of all, I want it to be here as a shadow, and then soften it out a little bit. So now it looks like the gutter's sticking out, and then I need to put a little bit on the gutter. So I should have probably had a bit of a sharper pencil, but it doesn't matter because what I can do is I can bring out the highlight. I think that gutter wanted to be just a little bit darker, and I do have, still working with the sand green. Sorry, I'm just going to put that dark back in there because it's come out. We want that to be kind of dark. So that kind of darkness has just popped out a bit. Now we can go back in with black, but I kind of like the sanguine. So that one I want the little tiny one here, just to tease that in, because we don't want it everywhere. We only want it underneath. We want it underneath those. We could give a bit of a shadow because you've got a kind of a bit of a because we want to keep that kind of tumble down rough kind of look. I'm just trying to see if the best colour, that's the better colour I think. It's a little bit too dark. Yes, it is. Yes, Charlemagne said the softer blender tools. I was going to buy the soft blender tools, but I might get away with those because I've never used the soft one. I've only ever used the hard one. So that was a learning curve for me to use that. So then it's disappeared onto the. So yes, sometimes that is a good idea. I'm just going to see if I can just turn that colour density down a touch. Just trying to see the colours. Because the problem you have, if you do that, you don't get the greens. Oh, that's not so bad. That's slightly better. Whoopsie. Oh, I don't know what happened there. My light's just gone up. But there's a bit of difference. But I'd say this is just a kind of having a go kind of thing. So it's a practice. Now I should have actually done the sky. So if I look at some colours for the sky. There's a spectrum blue. I thought there was a sky one, but I think this is a spectrum blue. And again, a bit of a play on here. It's a bit pale, is that one actually? I think we've got to be a bit bolder than that. So we'll go for this one. So again, just a bit of a it's going to get a bit dark in there, so so I don't want to use my fingers because I can't get, it's going to be too much for me. So I'm going to just see if I can use, no, I don't like that, so we'll use the harder blender tool, see if we can use that. I think it pushes it very well in rather than across the page, so but we just want a little bit of blue. We'll just try the softer one. Just have to clean it because it's got some quite darks in there now. So again, you just push that about. That's where I spilt the water, so it's going to be a bit wobbly there. I spilt some water, so we've got a bit of something going on there. So there's a bit of blue, and then we can just needs blending out a bit. And we could possibly use the eraser to make a bit of a cloud going on. A bit of a can be a bit of a cloudy day. So I'm just going to brush those bits away because that pastel isn't set, remember, so you've got to be a bit careful. It's got a little bit of cloud. And if you want to make it a bit cloudier, you can kind of put a little bit. You can smush that in a bit as well to make the clouds look a little bit. Then we've lost the highlight on the cloud, but we can get that back again by just but you see, you've got to remember we don't have a tooth, so we can't put a layer of white on and then start messing about because we've only got a thin layer, but there's a bit of something going on. I want to sort that bit out there because I got a bit carried away, so I think that's the olive, the pale olive we were using, and then I think I'm going to use the French grey. And so we kind of have a bit of a shadow going on here, just a tiniest amount of a shadow. And then all that would be shadow in there. We need to put a bit of shadow in each one if we can. Because there would be that little bit of shadow. And then there would be shadow under that one as well. And I may have to sharpen that because it should really be a bit sharper. So I'm going to use a little fine one for that because it wants to be quite fine. Oh, hi Miss Aromatic. Welcome to Bunny's Designs. Thank you. Just having a bit of a play. Now I did blow, so there was a bit of dust there because I need to smudge that into there to give it a bit of character now. But again, remember we don't have the advantage of a tooth, so our pencil is just going to sit there until we kind of have to sort that out. So we can push in there, and we can put these in here, then we can put our highlights, so it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, because we can, once we've got our shadow in, we can go in there with our highlight, and then we can go in there with our shadow again, and then that will give us, I mean, it's a colour book, but there's a little bit of definition now on there. You can see there's a bit of shadow building up. But we've got to be a bit careful because we do not have a tooth. So this isn't a traditional way to use these pastel pencils. This is just having a play. Oh, do excuse me. Oops, sorry about that. Let me just have a look. So I quite like that. I can put some, if I go in there with an eraser. Now this has got a kind of a, I mean, it's not really much of a point to it. And I want some nice sharp highlights, so I'm going to pull that out. This is the Derwent electric eraser. I don't know why I call it electric one because it's battery operated, but hey ho. And somewhere there is a little packet there. So when you get some free, and I bought extra because I didn't know when I'd be there. So you get this. I think this is the little packet out of here. And I keep the other bits. I keep this one, but what I'm doing is I want that crisp edge. So, oops, you push that back in there. My hands do not work very well. So you want it fairly well in because, and then you just push that in. Oh dear. And there's a bit of a clunk, and you know it's in then. I think that might be there. So what I want to do is to turn this on its side. And I'm going to do this now. And I'm just, takes a bit of practice to find out